What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing the T-90 A1 rebuild on the 59 CJ5. Got it all cleaned. We're ready for reassembly. Just got a quick light coat of primer on it to keep it from flash rusting on me. So the first thing we're going to do to reassemble it is we're going to install the reverse idler gear. So this is the front of the transmission, this is the rear. And your reverse idler is going to go in this way with the flared end facing the front. We've got a new shaft, so I'm going to put a little bit of gear oil on the shaft. Go ahead and drop our gear down in there. And if you notice, there's a little notch. That notch is going to face where our tie plate is going to go into. Just use a brass drift or a brass hammer. Alright, that's good enough. Sticking out the other side. Gear spins. So now this is going to get out of the way, and now it's time for the fun part. So here's our counter gear. So this is the main cluster gear. Yeah, it looks a little dirty, but it's been washed. It's just got a black finish on it from years of soaking in that greasy old gear oil. So in this bag, so this is the kit I'm using is a minor rebuild kit. It's available at southernjeepand4x4.com. So this bag of needle bearings and these washers, there's 2, 4, 6 washers, are going to stack inside of your counter gear. And the washers basically act as the end, and then the needle bearings stack in. So this is very fun. I got a new counter shaft gear here. Counter shaft here. This is an old one I have. This is the one we're gonna help use with reassembly. It's got some wear on it, so it's gonna make reassembly a little bit easier than using a new shaft, and we'll put the new shaft in later. You'll see why. And it's always good when you tear these down to save some of these old needle bearings. You know, even if you lose one or two old ones isn't going to hurt anything, because I'm not 100% sure if we're going to have any extras out of this kit or not. So it's been a real long time since I've done this, so I'm going to try to remember as best I can. But to make your life much easier, you're going to use some transmission assembly lube. Grease just isn't going to be tacky enough for this. I'm sure it's possible, but we want to alleviate as much frustration as possible. So go ahead and just pack the crap out of it with this. We're going to go ahead and slide our first washer in. So down in here, you're going to have a little ledge machined into the gear. So we're going to push that down until it hits that ledge. Alright, it stopped. Make sure you get this all over your fingers and everything. We want everything to be real tacky. So we're just going to go ahead and get these all nice. That's right, then you're just going to stack them in there one by one. So I'm going to do just this one to alleviate some time, but it's going to be the same exact process for the rest of them. except I believe the rest of them you're not going to have a ledge on, so you're going to have to just kind of free set them. Now, for some reason, I don't know why they didn't use a cage roller bearing setup on these, like found on the earlier Dane 18 transfer cases. And I believe the MB, the T-84, might have used that setup. There's probably a reason they changed from it, maybe because of strength, but it sure doesn't make reassembly any fun. Got a little bit too much on those. I'm not keeping count either. I don't know how many go. You just want to fill up the whole circle with them. And you want to make sure they're all straight, because some of them will go in, you know, crooked like that. And you'll fight getting that last one in there. I could try to get a little cocky and do 2 at a time. That worked that time. And yes, this is very messy. I think we've got room for one more. Yeah, so a couple of them got a little crooked in there. There we go. So we'll make sure none kicked out on us, and then take your finger and make sure they're pushed all up against the wall. So here, hopefully you can see that. Can't really see much through the viewfinder up here, but that's what it's going to look like. And then we're going to go ahead and put in our other washer on top. And you can see there's another ledge on this end. So alright, I'm going to shut the camera off and get this finished, and we'll go ahead and install it. Alright, so I got all the needle bearings in. The kit did come with some extras. Here's the extras, and yes, they are all in. One thing I just had a brain fart on in the previous scene, I said there was a part of the gear that had a machine ledge. No, that's not true. There's a spacer. When I took the this is a few weeks after I took the transmission apart and cleaned everything. It's just been kind of sitting ready to be reassembled. There's actually a spacer that goes in the middle, so that spacer is going to kind of sit in there, and then that's your ledge. So it's going to be washer, needle bearings, washer, needle bearings, washer. So you're going to have 3 washers on each side stacked with 2 sets of needle bearings. So they're basically on your thrust side of the shaft, and then that spacer's in the middle. All right, so moving on, we're going to go ahead and install the counter gear in the case. So how I normally do it is these bearings are pretty well secured in here by the assembly lube, which is a pleasant surprise. And we're going to go ahead and install our thrust washers. So you have 3 total. So you're going to have your big one, brass side's going to go towards your gear set, and you have this tab that's going to go inside the recess of the case. And you have this brass one, which is going to go, notice how you have 2 tabs. That's going to go in these 2 tabs here on the back of your gear. So go ahead and throw some more tacky stuff on the back and front, because we don't want to fight. We don't want to fighting us as much as possible. So I got that tackied up. And then you got one last one. It looks kind of like a skillet. It's got this tab. That's going to go at the very end of the case. And then your tab end is going to be facing up. Alright, so we're ready to install the gear. Got the 2 back thrust washers held in with the new counter shaft. And the front, we're probably not going to get lucky with just dropping it in there with all the thrust washers, but we're going to give it a shot. Might get lucky. Never know. So I'm just checking to make sure all the bearings are still in there. Nothing fell out. Make sure all pressed against there good. Because if one of these bearings in here is sticking up a little bit, it's going to mess everything up. You have to repack everything, redo everything, I mean. Alright, so our front just fell. It's just a little, there's no really wrong way to do it. Just it'll fight you a little bit. In the past, I've, you know, just left one thrust washer out and just pried it to one side and drove it in a little bit. We're just going to use this to kind of hold that thrust washer in there. Let's try it again. So I'm going to put it all the way in the back. Yeah. This case is pretty tight, so, which is good. And then that tab on that rear thrust washer, you want to make sure is locked against the case. All right, we'll go ahead and remove the front. We'll install it after the gear set's somewhat in there. All right, so I'm going to use this front old counter shaft to kind of make everything straight. And it should just go right through. Shouldn't have to use a hammer or anything like that. And then take a peek in the front. Make sure you're not pushing any of the bearings out. And then I'm just holding it with my finger, and then I'm feeling it. So we're about halfway out of the what do I want to say, about halfway through the needle bearings on the very last one, so we're good. So now we're going to go ahead and try to get our thrust washer in there. Remember, there's a tab and you'll see the machined opening on it. it sitting there. Oh, it just popped out. Looking for my brass drift. There it is. Alright, so I got it just past where's a little bound up, and let's go ahead and let's tap it in the rest of the way. Alright, so we got it started. One thing I forgot to mention is you got to have the slot lined up with this slot. We're going to move this slot and then move this slot so we can put on our retaining plate. Probably have to. That reverse gear is being a little stubborn. We'll come back to it. All right. Giving it some test spins. Nice and tight. Feels good. We're going to check end play. So the spec is 12 to 18. And check it between your thrust washers and your case. That's a 18. There we go. We got a 14 in there. $14 on the front. And then we got a 12. All right, cool. All right, so the next thing we're going to move on to is the main shaft. Real quick before we move on, I told you guys the right thing. I just put the gear in, reverse gear in backwards. I noticed it doing a quick once over. So this is how you want your gear mesh, not backwards like I had it. So, all right. And then in that process, I went ahead and turned the pin. So now we can install our lock plate. That's going to go in from the bottom up. And it's just going to go into those two slots. And that's going to keep the pins from backing out and rotating on you. Alright, so our main shaft. Got the back, the front. So here's our second gear. Looks good. Synchro teeth are good. Brass bushing inside is good. Very, very minimal wear on a lot of these parts. The synchros were broken. The second to third gear synchros were broke, but one of the Synchro rings was messed up pretty bad, but gear wise everything is fine, and bearing wise, or bushing wise I should say. So we're gonna slap that on. Spins nice. We got zero movement. We got a nice tight fit on there. So now we're gonna take our new blocking rings. These are different than the previous aftermarket ones that were offered. These are annealed, so these are going to be a lot stronger than, you know, some of the older kits, which I'm pretty happy to have. None of my Jeeps have these newer annealed blocking rings, so I just put some oil on there. Much tighter fit too than what I remember, which is good. All right, put a little bit more oil on there. You can see it's got grooves to keep that oil soaked in the brass here to minimize wear. All right, so we're gonna slap that on there. Alright, so I got it in the vise. Got the camera all kinds of crazy on the overhead of the workbench. So we got the second gear on, the second gear synchro. Now we're gonna put together the synchro hub. So it's gonna go on like this. But before we do so, we're gonna go ahead and assemble our synchro dogs and synchro springs. So what you're gonna do, hopefully, there we go. I'm trying to look through the viewfinder. So you're going to take, see how you have two notches. You're going to put one notch in, and then push it in. Pick will help you just push it in. Alright, so that's one. And then for the other side, we're going to offset it. So the other one's going to go in the opposite way. Alright, so now that they're opposite, so we're going to put our... So before we put our dogs in, we're just going to go ahead and throw the hub on. There we go. So we're going to take more of our handy assembly lube. Go ahead and coat the synchros, the synchro dogs, I mean. Those all nice and greased up. And we're gonna just go ahead and push them down in there. Now you want to make sure they move. They need to move just a little bit because they go. So you so you see how you have your grooves on your blocking ring, so they're going to go in like that. You just spin your first blocking ring, push it down. Good. We'll spin the whole shaft and everything. Go ahead and do the other one. Alright, so had a little bit of an issue. So on the synchro hub, we had some damage on the inside and on the outer teeth. So I spent a few minutes doing some filing, got it nice and clean, got some burrs out and everything, got the springs back in. And on the synchro dogs themselves, I had to do a lot of filing, I actually had to take the Dremel tool with a fine stone and go across and take some material off because they're just too big. This original one here just slid right in, not an issue whatsoever. I mean, honestly, in a pinch, if you lost or broke one of these, you know, you could reuse this original. It's in good shape, but it's getting new ones. So we're gonna put our hub back on. We're gonna take our assembly lube again. I put it back in the parts washer too to get any potential metal shavings and stuff out. And then we're just gonna slide the dog in there. It's way easier now. That's how it's supposed to be. So we're gonna have it angled like that. And then you're gonna push them. They're gonna have a little spring tension on them. That's the springs doing their job. Yeah, these are much better. All right. We're going to take our sliding ring. And the dogs are going to kick out a little bit on you, which is no big deal. So just let's get you a right angle pick or flathead screwdriver or something, push them down all the way. Probably got to get a little rubber hammer. And then you should see the dog start folding down. All right, so just get some, you're gonna need some decent sized snap ring pliers. These springs are pretty stiff. There we go. All right, so now we're gonna put our other blocking ring in, just like that. So this slider here is your second and third. So right now we're in second, and then in between is neutral, and then forward is third gear. So we're done with this. Now it's gonna be time to move on to install the input shaft and third gear. All right, so before we put the gear set in, we're gonna put the oil slinger in. Just gonna slide around this gear, and it's gonna be your two short Allen bolts, your cap head screws. If you wanna get technical. Right here. Don't need to be super tight. All right. So it's going to hang out like that, and looks like I forgot the sliding gear. Let me go grab the sliding gear real quick. Alright, so we got the main shaft in there. So now on our input shaft, we're going to stack in, you guessed it, more roller bearings. It's going to be the same process I showed you on the counter gear. Just going to put some assembly lube in there, stack these bearings around here. Then we'll slide the bearing retainer and the washer and all that stuff. Go ahead and install it, and then our main shaft will go in there. So let me do that real quick. So here's our input shaft. We got the needle bearing stacked in there. We got our front input shaft bearing, and then also there's the oil deflector that goes in between the gear and the back of the bearing. That's just keeps from the oil sloshing around in there from going out the front, because it is a open bearing. They do offer sealed type bearings, but I don't have any. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this in there, get the gears kind of meshed up. And your bearing should just go right in the case, just like it's doing. Alright, so we got the input shaft in. We're going to go ahead and put on the bearing retainer snap ring. You can see it. There's a groove. Alright, got the input shaft snap ring on. So your felt seal is going to go on the shaft here, and you want to pre-soak it in gear oil. If you put it in dry, it's going to leak. You just want to get some oil saturation in it. Because these transmissions are pretty leaky, and we want to try to reduce the risk of leaks as much as possible. So it's just going to slide over like so. And then next, just going to go ahead and put our gasket on our front housing. Now I use a gasket shellac on these paper cardboard style seals. It just seems to work better than conventional more modern RTV. I haven't tried just straight RTV on these to see how they stop leaks, but I've had good luck in the past with this. So I'm going to do both sides. So you notice you got a little notch, so that notch is going to go there on the gasket. And that's going to get secured by the Allen bolts, and then your throwout bearing pivot is going to go on that side. And you just take your Allen, your cap head screws, put them through. Alright, so I got that all tightened up. So we're going to put our other blocking ring on. Then we're going to put our shaft in here, and then our sliding gear goes on. This is your first and reverse gear. That's going to slide on the back of the shaft. A little bit of a taper fit to it, but once it gets down, it slides good. So we're going to slide that through. Slide the gear all the way back. And then we'll probably have to put our second and third sliding ring up a little bit. But not too far because we don't want the synchro dogs to fall out. There we go. So there we go. That pushes in nice. So the sliding ring is holding on to the third gear input shaft. So now we're going to support the rest of the shaft. So we got a rear spacer. Well, before that, we got our rear plate here. That's going to go on. And before we secure it, I just got it holding on. I'm gonna put some RTV around it because you got another leak point where this mates to the back of the case. And so we're gonna throw our bearing spacer on, and then our bearing backing plate. Make sure it's pushed all the way forward. And we got our rear bearing. This also has a groove force snap ring that's not going to be in use because it's the same as the front. Same number, I mean. We're going to seat this all the way on the plate. Alright, and this next step is optional, but I highly recommend it, and that is putting your output gear on just to keep everything together. This gear is going to prevent this shaft from coming out, and we'll remove it prior to assembling the gear case to the transfer case. And it's just going to be snug. We're not going to go crazy tight with it. Alright, so now we got the shift tower in the vise. Got the shift cane installed with the excuse me, with the beehive spring. I was running low on camera battery, so I figured to just struggle with that off camera. But you know, you just kind of stuff it in there, and there's 3 notches, and then it compresses against the shift cane to keep it tight. So now for the shift rails, we have our 2 detent balls. So they're going to go in. Oh, spring's going first. Get that out. Getting a little ahead of myself. Yeah, I gotta get this tightly secured back in the vise like I had it. Alright, so the spring's going first. I don't know what I was thinking. They're gonna just slide down in there. There we go. Alright, so now, we're gonna put our our low gear, our first and reverse shift fork in first, and then here is our detent for it. Just making sure I got it in the right place. Because the manual is pretty vague on the shift tower. It's just an exploded view. So I'm just trying to go off memory. So yeah, that seems right. Because see our length, we got our three detents. So this would be either first reverse, and then this would be neutral. So we want to make sure it doesn't go too far out, because this is the back of the transmission, this is the front. So this is going to get the plugs, and this actually is open for the rails to slide. So yeah, we're good. That's the right one. So we can go ahead and slide our fork in, our fork shaft in, and put a little gear oil on it. Get everything lubricated a little bit. And slide it through the fork. We're going to find our hole for our roll pin. Probably have to pull it out. There we go. Alright, so now we're going to put our detent ball in. So these balls are exactly the same size as the steering ones. So, you know, if one flies off into orbit, if you have an extra bearing or two from a steering box rebuild, it's the same ball. Well, did it again. As you can see, it'd be kind of tricky. That spring's really stiff, so there's not really much of a recess for the ball to ride on. Probably if I tilt back the tower a little bit. There we go. There we go. I'm just going to use a screwdriver, mash it down. See, and just flew out that easy. All right, we're gonna try this again. And don't put your face over this, because this thing's under a lot of tension. There we go. All right, we did it. Yay. Without losing an eyeball. So we're going to go ahead and put in our roll pin. Alright, so I got the roll pin in. These are the nail head type. So we're just going to crush the other side. I tried using regular roll pins. They just didn't want to fit right in there the right size. Alright. And then it's going to be the same thing for the other fork. So this is going to be our second and third. Alright, so it's going to be the same drill for the second and third gear shift fork and rail. Hopefully my head's not blocking. Alright. Now if you notice this notch here, we're going to make sure that's turned correctly. That's where the shift cane's going to grab. And then we're going to put a roll pin in. Alright, so we got them both in. We're in neutral right now, so it'll be ready to install, and all we have left is the front shift rail plugs. Alright, that's it. So we got a done shift tower. It's not really that hard, it's not really that complicated. So, alright, let's install it and check out the final product. Alright, here it is, all complete. Got it in third gear. That's going to help keep the shaft and everything stabilized. You know, if this was going to be in long-term storage, you can wrap around some wire to the gear and then to the tower. But this is going to be made to the transfer case here in just a couple days. As soon as I'm done with it, now that I'm done with this, I'm going to move on to the transfer case. And just got a first coat of black on there. It's going to clean up the gasket surfaces. Get the bell housing on, and then when it's on the transfer case, I'll do, you know, the last couple coats of paint on it. I just wanted to put at least one coat on it, you know, just to have something nice to look at. But alright, if you got any questions, my email's in the website, southernjeepand4x4.com. I built a few of these T-90s. Hopefully this video is pretty in-depth. If there's anything I left out, you know, reach out to me. And, you know, a lot of times, as long as the gears are good, all you need is that minor rebuild kit with the bearings and synchros, and, you know, the same exact kit we just used with this. And these will last you many happy miles. So, all right, appreciate it. Y'all have a good one.